All right, so we were talking about the Alhambra house.
Our sweet
there was a
Alhambra
name.
home.
Yeah, our sweet Alhambra home.
Yeah. Also known as Dank Pad.
Right, the Dank Pad.
in certain circles.
I mean, how many records were done there, do you think? I mean, we must have done like a dozen or something.
Yeah. I think,
because I didn't have a studio at the time.
Right.
I had a mobile rig. I was taking it wherever. We did this How a Man Is Made record in a few days, which was the first Wide Streets thing.
Yeah. Which was also a really important moment in terms of like putting together a session with session musicians.
Right. We had Anthony Shattuck play bass. Yeah. Andrew Pompey on drums.
Yeah. Well, because there's like
Phil Glenn on
there's a
fiddle.
school of punk rock record making where you just have a band and that's your band and that's who's on the record.
Right.
And this was like let's branch out here and let's bring in some other people and see if we can expand the palette a little bit beyond what we were doing ourselves.
I think of that record periodically, mainly because like no one's heard it.
Yeah, it never came out.
It never was released.
No.
And there are lots of reasons for that, but I do think 10, 15, 20 years from now, at some point that thing's going to come out, and I think it will be a really interesting, and I think not necessarily a Rosetta Stone, but a kind of a really like unique document of what an extremely talented group of people were getting ready to do.
Right.
Because there's just something about that record. I mean, I still can remember like the songs on that record. It has a certain kind of spirit.
Yeah. I think there are moments in any musician's journey where you suddenly find yourself like reaching for something new.
Right.
And I think like that process can change like really fundamentally how you think of music and how you think of yourself. And for me, that was the power of that was like the power of sessions. Like
interesting.
The power of doing that record was like, oh my God, just by bringing in a few other musicians into this sphere, into our world, and teaching them our songs, all of a sudden, like, we've completely transformed this music that started, like, as some garage rock, some drum and guitar garage rock type stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Totally,
like, and so I think, like, for myself, just, like, I didn't grow up in that world. I was not a session musician at the time, had never spent a lot of time consistently in the studio. And so my understanding was, your band goes in and you cut what you've been doing in rehearsal.
Right.
And this was, hey, there's this thing called like arrangement.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that really was kind of the first time where we started like figuring that stuff out.
Yeah.
But it's funny because we were sort of doing it together.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Well, look, like neither of us went to music school. No. Like we're both self-taught. And
for better or for worse.
Yeah, for better or for worse, whatever. Like I have no, it's brought us here, whatever. So,
right.
But the language of like studio sessions and arrangement and session musicians, like this was the beginning of starting to understand that, and which I think then went on to like deeply influence how Psychic Temple operated going forward.
100%, yeah. It was I think a lot of our musical lives and careers are just this constant learning by doing thing.
Totally. Yeah, which can make you feel kind of dumb later when you go like, wow, how did it take me like 25 years on this earth to realize something that like,
why didn't I know this
yes
before
from day one?
Right. I'm an idiot.
Yeah.
But you know what? The funny thing is like now I know so much shit that I forget how much I know.
Yeah.
Like when I went out to the University of Nebraska, Omaha a couple weeks ago, and they just did this like rapid fire thing where they had students coming in every half an hour to have me like critique mixes or whatever. And it was so fun. And even music that I don't like, I was like, oh, here's how you could make it better. Right. I was like, oh, here, let me show you this little EQ curve, boost, sweep, cut, this thing, that thing. And they're like, oh man, thank you so much. And then the more I would talk to them, the more I was like, Jesus, man, like being obsessed. This maybe will. You don't necessarily want this to be a kind of like we're just going to go down a year by year discography of our friendship or collaborations. But one of the things that I kind of wanted to ask you about, maybe this sort of dovetails into it, is the idea of like workaholism.
Yeah.
Because I think we're both workaholics, and I'm reticent to immediately defend myself and say that that's a good thing, because I know that there are things about it that are not good.
Right.
But I would sincerely say that there are much worse things to be addicted to. I'm hopelessly and utterly addicted to music. But I do think a big part of that is it's sort of this almost like kind of perverse, like spiritual kind of practice where it's like I need to be in the stream of the muse, and I need to be working with musicians, and so many of my best friendships and relationships are with people involved in this work, and I know that there are and can be consequences for that
right.
With, let's say, loved ones and other relationships outside of music. But I wonder, I kind of wanted to ask you this, if you feel like, you have to sort of, do you feel like as though you have to make a apology or an excuse for constantly working on music?
Okay, to myself, or
maybe.
But well, I think I see two sides of this. One is that I personally have no interest in getting to a place where I feel like I know what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. Like, there's something about not knowing that's always exciting. Like, and once I feel like if you're at a place where you just have a formula and you whether it's in the studio or as a musician or as a songwriter or any of it, mm-hmm. where you're just going like, 1 + 1 = 2, and this is how I write a song, or this is how I make this is how you record drums.
I mean, what you're describing though is basically art as commerce.
Yeah.
This is the way that a lot of things work with popular music. They say, give me the click.
Yes.
Here's the tempo. It's just you and an engineer.
Yeah. Maybe
a producer.
Yeah.
And, you don't interact on a creative or musical level really with anyone. Yeah.
That's almost unimaginably boring to me.
Same.
I also just feel like it's in like not knowing that where all of your like discoveries are made and what keeps being like continually refreshing. That being said, I think like both of us know what it feels like to be frustrated, because I think we're both kind of like trial by fire type of artists. Yeah. And so I think, and I can, I'll speak for myself here, but I think this would apply to you too. I look back on like a lot of the stuff I've done with like a fair amount of embarrassment. Like sometimes
of like your own
work, of my work. Yeah, because I almost always have to just do something to figure out whether it works or not.
Totally.
And I think part of our workaholism too is just we will just jump into anything.
Yeah, in a way, like we're just constantly experimenting.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And a lot of those experiments are inevitably failures.
See, if we were scientists, people would be saying, these motherfuckers are just experimenting all the time.
Yeah, exactly.
They don't call them workaholics.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like those motherfuckers get like the Nobel Prize.
Yeah, where's my?
Yeah.
Give me one.
You know how many records I made that no one's ever heard?
Oh man, so many experiments in vain.
If they could only gave prizes for unsigned, unreleased music.
Oh man, yeah. Brilliant records no one's ever heard.
Yeah. So, I think like in our like in the cultural imagination, there's a lot of people love like the perfectionist who squirreled away in their studio or in their bedroom for years and emerged with like a fucking masterpiece.
Right.
And I'm not that person at all, and
No.
and I don't even understand how someone's mind could work where they could just continually be working on the same thing for years and years, like trying to get it right. For like, I feel like I have musical ADD, and what interests, in fact, it's like a problem.
Yeah.
It's like what interests me today is not going to interest me tomorrow. I really like make a lot of quick turns and.
Okay, well, this seems like another good segue to talk about, like, the new Cherry Glazerr record was announced like last week.
Yes.
So,
Stuffed and Ready. 2019.
Coming out in February?
Yeah.
Is that right?
Correct.
2019?
Yeah.
So, I wonder, so Cherry Glazerr, I feel like, has kept you pretty busy for the last few years.
Yeah.
You've been on tour constantly.
Yes.
I think, I don't necessarily feel like I'm like talking out of turn here by saying that you've essentially recorded like 3 records.
Yeah, we made it. There was a little, I wouldn't call it like an identity crisis. There was just a lot of experimentation that happened. Clem, the songwriter and creator and founder of the band, was searching for something, the sound, the music, the songs, all of the above.
Experimenting.
And to be honest, we were just having fun.
Right.
And it was all fun, and we like enjoyed making all of that, and it took us a little bit of a while to land on what we felt we wanted the next LP to be.
So the first one that you did with Cherry Glazerr, this is like when you joined the band, it was like you and Sasami.
Correct.
And Clem, obviously. And I don't know if there was other personnel stuff going on at the time when you guys went into Sunset Sound with Joe Ciccarelli.
Right.
And then you guys cut the Apocalyptic.
Yeah, which was the second LP of Cherry Glazerr after some lineup changes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that record came out. You guys toured like constantly, basically for what, like a year and a half?
Yeah, about, yeah.
Then you cut a different record after kind of coming off of all that touring.
Yeah.
You kind of cut this experimental record.
Yes.
Started like writing songs through that process.
Yes.
And then ended up kind of like, setting all that stuff to the side and then starting all over again.
Yeah.
And then cutting Stuffed and Ready, which is what the first single, Daddy, just came out.
Correct.
Like last week.
Yeah, exactly.
So about your musical ADD. So through that entire process, right? Let's say, I don't know, how long have you been in Cherry Glazerr now?
Like about 3 years.
Okay. So you essentially cut like a record a year and toured for a year and a half.
Yeah.
And probably cut another 10 or 15 records with me.
Yeah. Yeah.
At the studio.
Yeah.
And doing Psychic Temple stuff, session drumming for other people.
Yeah.
I mean, I would imagine that young Tabor would look at what, current Tabor is doing and just say like, well, that's it. That was the whole point.
Yeah. Right. You're absolutely right.
Yeah.
And I have to stop and remind myself of that sometimes because, and I'm sure you or a lot of people can relate to this, you work so hard to kind of create the lifestyle that you want to have, and like what is it called when I don't know. I guess you dream of doing this.
Yeah.
And you plot and you plan and you like
try to make it manifest.
Yeah, manifest.
Yeah.
Thank you for manifest. Yeah, manifest your reality.
Yeah, yeah.
So,
the secret.
Yeah. So yeah, you do, and then you get there and you completely lose sight of like how hard it was and how much work it took and how you like this at one point in your life it was like a faraway dream.
Yeah. Now I've heard I would not look at my life as any kind of like insane, certainly not a financial success. But what I've heard from people who have had
you chose music, man.
I know this is the cross I must bear.
Yeah.
But from what I've heard from people who have had a lot of financial success and have kind of spent a lot of time and energy pursuing their art and their craft, is that it was very hard to get there, and then it's harder to stay there.
Right. I mean, that's something that I can't. I don't know. I don't think that life doesn't work that in big, blocks that way, though,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like every single day you get up and you make a choice and you try to stay engaged and work on stuff and be inspired.
But what I would say is that I think, let's say, somebody from the outside could look at, let's say even some random Cherry Glazerr fan who didn't know who you were before
Right.
you joined the band.
Sure.
And they say, well, this guy just joined the band and he wasn't one of the original people. They don't know that you'd played in 40 bands up to that point, and you didn't come in as some sort of mercenary.
Right.
You know what I mean? You believe in the concept of a band, being a band member, working on music together.
Yeah.
And I think in a way you found a good partner in Clem, because you obviously know her much better than I do, but she seems also like a bit of a workaholic to me.
100%.
And so the fact that you guys are both kind of constantly recording, constantly touring, and then as soon as you stop for a few minutes, you're like, we got to do this, we got to do that. Hey, we got to rehearse. We got to do a video shoot. We got to do a film shoot. Hey, let's go out to the desert with Chris and record a record. I mean, there's just a constant, kind of maybe Iggy would call it a lust for life.
Yeah.
That's what I would say.
Yeah.
It's like, I mean, when I was young and I'm reading, these rock and roll history books, I was just amazed that anybody could, that you would read one name and it would pop up on a different record. And these people, how did they know each other? And how did one person play on a record in Memphis and then they also played on another record in New York and LA?
Right.
And at a certain point, you find yourself in all these cities. And then sometimes you find yourself with opportunities to do things with people there, and you're just kind of oh, right, part of it is just this crazy, consistent pattern of hard work, kind of trying to create opportunities for
Right.
yourself.
Right.
But I think there's a kind of, something that people miss a lot is just, aside from the machinery
Yeah.
of it all, I just look at the dozens of records that you made before you ever joined Cherry Glazerr, and then after joining, you've only made more records outside of Cherry Glazerr than you probably had made in the previous years.
Right. Well, people talk about how you have well, thanks, man. But people talk about how you better be in love with the process if you're going to make art or do music or do art of any kind. Because if you're not in love with the process, if you can't be in love with it when no one gives a shit,
Right.
you have to, you have no hope.
Well,
you know what I mean?
Well, I think all the time, I think for me, one of the things with the studio and producing records and encouraging the musical community is that I have a very deep vested interest in supporting music.
Right.
It's if somebody's worked hard at music, I want to help work hard on their behalf.
Oh yeah, that's what energizes me.
Yeah.
Oh, you wrote these songs? Those are great songs. Let's do it.
Yeah.
Let's record it.
Let's make them better than
Yeah.
they've ever been
Right.
together.
Yeah, exactly. And I feel similarly about touring, that it's one of the we live at this juncture where it can be hard to feel connected to people. I think as an an artist, it's hard to feel connected to your audience. Who are these people and where do they, like, does anything real exist, or does like is our whole existence on the internet?
Right.
And like when you tour, though, you just go and you come face to face with people.
Yeah, it's the realist.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it grounds you in like what the music is actually for and what it really means. And I don't know. And I think similarly, it's same thing with being in the studio. Like I think a lot of it comes down to like community, because it's like nourishing.
Yeah.
It's like to be around like artists and other people who love music and like fans. I don't know. It's so easy to be cynical.
You know, I think I've thought about this a lot lately, and I think in particular, like, artists are pretty like hardy stock, because, as you know, you have to deal with so much rejection and kind of like condescension and undercutting of like your internal like desires.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And I think people have a hard time even admitting that they want to do it.
Right.
To themselves or to the world. I think like a lot of what shuts people down is like even saying like that you have this dream or that you want to do it. It's so hard because there's so much, exactly, like rejection. There's so much condescension and judgment, and how unrealistic can you be to think like that could be your life, you know?
Yeah. I mean, and there's all these, like I always remember, this was almost like, this was almost kind of like heartbreaking for me, but I remember when you guys put out that record and you did all the covers.
Heartbreaking for you. Okay. Yeah, we hand painted 50
album covers.
Yes.
12-inch by 12-inch.
Yeah.
Each one of them totally unique.
Yeah.
And it was like a whole like crew. It was like you and Danny.
Yeah.
And
yes. All of our friends got involved.
Yeah.
And we put months of work into this idea. We were like, how cool would it be if when people bought the album, they got like a unique hand-painted album cover for every single one.
With a download code on the back.
Yeah, exactly.
And so then the next stage, so the first stage was that we made the record.
Right.
Right. And then you painted all these, and then you were like, we're going to have a gallery showing album release party at Pearspace.
Yes.
And if I remember correctly, not one sold.
I think you were the only one that bought any of them, and I think you bought 2.
I bought 4.
You bought 4.
I still have them. I still have all 4 of them.
Well,
I bought 4 because
I don't know what to say.
The shit broke my heart.
Yeah.
And all I could think is, nobody's worked harder than these people. And this is what the world... I mean... It's a funny and darkly comic thing to think about that. And now with Cherry Glazerr, you are performing for like thousands of people every night. But there were like dozens of instances like that had happened to you.
Yeah, countless.
Right? Where it's like you played a show, nobody comes.
Yeah.
You put months and months of work into an idea, nobody cares. You put thousands of dollars into a project, you can't make $10 back on it.
Yeah.
And so much of like art and the sort of the reason that we're kind of like workaholics is because we're constantly trying to push through that.
Yeah.
And it's like if you sit idly by after a defeat like that, it would like destroy you.
Yeah.
But if you get up and start working on the next thing, you're like, all right, you can't have it.
Yeah.
You can't take it from me.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's an argument to be made that we're running from something too. I mean, let's be honest. I mean, like,
Fear.
There is a way to like run from failure by working more.
That's true.
You know?
Yeah.
Like,
I mean,
where every
business
failed
people
project,
do it all the time, right?
Right, exactly.
The family is falling apart. They're like, I had to work to do. Yeah.
And where every failed project just becomes your like fuel to just like burn it out even more. Right. And you know, I don't.
That shit's dark.
Yeah, and you know, what can I say? Like, I feel like, you know, I've had some good fortune, and like there's no question about that. And playing with Cherry Glazerr is like a dream come true for me. And musically, in terms of like friendships and all of the above. And
Do you feel like you finally have the opportunity to sort of let the rubber hit the road a little bit? Because like you were already working hard and at a sort of breakneck pace, but now you actually have a team of people that are sort of supporting and enabling you,
right,
and are allowing you to like do what you're good at because you were kind of going to do it anyway.
Yeah, totally. And I think that I bring something special to the team because of that DIY background,
right,
and because of like having been a part of that community for so long, where I feel like that's a perspective that's important and that people shouldn't lose sight of. That the perspective of someone who has played to no one for years, or everything that we've just talked about.
Yeah. Or at a Psychic Temple show, that may happen again,
right,
like next week.
But yeah, sure. But but at the same time though, I also feel like, my like default mode is to be teachable. Yeah. And I just feel like for whatever I'm bringing to the situation, I'm also just learning constantly.
Right.
And being a part of this sort of like touring operation and where things move fast and we have there's always a lot of work to do. I feel like I have a million things to learn about that, and that and I feel really lucky and grateful to have that opportunity to get, to even learn and have that experience.
And to work with people like Joe Ciccarelli,
yeah, exactly,
great producers.
Yeah, totally. I mean, why are we doing this? Really,
yeah,
if not for that kind of stuff, you know what I mean? That's like the take home.
I mean, yeah, like it's almost like the first time that you're sort of like, paid to work at a place like Sunset Sound.
Yeah. Where
you're just sort of like, what?
Yes.
How did that happen?
Yeah. Whose life am I living right now?
Right.
Yeah. So I don't know. I feel. In some ways,
Didn't you have like somebody who was like paid to come tune your drums there?
Oh yeah. It's wild, man. Yeah. It's totally wild. And I think you just like have to just stay humble about the whole thing, because there's stuff like that feels like almost like ridiculous.
Right.
But then also you just like take it in stride and it's all super fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it has given me more time to focus on my playing, which is super important.
How much do you still practice every day?
Yeah.
About how long you think?
Well, I try to practice a couple hours a week, like maybe 5-6 hours a week. So it might not be every day. It might be like 2 hours one day.
Right.
You know what I mean?
How long is a Cherry Glazerr show?
A Cherry Glazerr show, like a headline show, is like about an hour and 10 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is a great workout.
Yeah.
I mean,
because you're kind of beating the shit out of the drums.
They're high energy shows.
I mean, I always think of when I saw you guys play, I was like, Jesus Christ, man, Tabor is like, he's hurting those drums. And I remembered when we did the first session for Psychic Temple 4, where it was like 6 or 7 of us in the room and no headphones, and I was on the other side of the room playing acoustic guitar.
Yeah.
And I told you, if you can't hear me playing acoustic guitar, you're playing too loud.
Yeah, I remember that. Hey, you gotta take all experiences in stride, you know. There's a time and a place for that, and then there's a time and a place to just really beat the shit out of the drums.
Yeah.
I like doing both.
Yeah, no, you're good at both. I think that the interesting thing for me is every once in a while I think about that particular weekend. I don't remember exactly when it was now, but there was that Saturday that we recorded the first 4 songs for Psychic Temple with like Max Bennett and Avi and John and Danny Frankel. I'm trying to remember who else was there. I must be missing somebody, but and then the very next day we did music for airports.
Yes.
And I remember driving home. So this is where it all connects. Is I knew that it was a lot to ask of you to play drums to an acoustic guitar that was like 10 or 15 feet away. So I was trying to play really hard, and my left hand was just a mess driving home that night. And I remember thinking, like, there's just no way I could play tomorrow. And we were supposed to do the whole.
Yeah, there's probably 15 musicians coming into the studio in like 8 hours.
Yeah. And I remember we did all that stuff at All Welcome. I'm like driving home from Inglewood, and it was, I don't know, it was late that night. I remember like, stars were out, or what approximates a star in Southern California.
Right.
I'm driving home down the 405, and I'm just like, I keep kind of trying to like massage like, blood back into my left hand. And I just thought, like, why am I so stupid? Like, why did I do this to myself, And then I woke up the next morning and I felt great. And we cut that fucking record in a couple hours.
That's like a microcosm of being a musician.
Yeah. Why am I so stupid?
Yeah.
And then you wake up the next morning, you're like, I feel great. And then that night you say, why am I so stupid? It's just Sisyphusian over and over again.
Yeah, if you're us.
Yeah, here we are. I don't know how much more time we got on the tape. Not much. This shit is perfect, actually. Anything you wanted to mention before we wrap it up? I felt like I wanted to ask you like some stupid questions about like, I don't know, your favorite drummers or stupid shit like that, but I didn't.
Yeah, I think we said
those
it, man.
Those are dumb, dumb questions.
What I think we'd said, I think we did it.
All right, well.
I like what we did.
Me too.
Yeah.
All right, that's a wrap.
All right, man.